President of the association and president of the meeting and other dignitaries on the dais and members of TMA, students, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me say that it's always a great pleasure for me to be back here, and here I'm not saying it so that because it's a nice way to start a speech, because my childhood is very much connected with this place. My father was manager of rubber plantations in a company which was then called Malayalam Plantations, and this was in Palakkad, which is you have to go from here to along the highway to Ambalur and then turn left, and so then 15 years of my childhood was spent there. And during vacations when we came from school, the abiding memory which I have is, life in the estates was always, it was a different kind of life. It was not like life anywhere else. We hardly saw anybody. If we heard the sound of a car, we got very excited. And so on Sundays, about twice a month, we used to come to, it was a great outing because I was a small guy then. And we'll go to Girija Theatre for a morning show. It used to be an English movie. And I remember various movies which I saw there. And after that was the highlight, was when we used to have mutton cutlets in what was called the Casino restaurant those days. So which was near the municipal bus stand. And then other memories include accompanying my father to, when he used to come for what was called in the estates, to collect store cash, which means you have to collect cash from the bank here, and it used to be carried in a steel trunk. So I was just telling some friends here, in those days you can imagine how safe it was, because there was a driver, my father, mother and probably myself, and there used to be 2 steel trunks full of currency which used to be taken from that the SBI in Dharmodayam buildings. What building? Yeah, from that, and it used to be loaded into the boot of the car in plain view of everybody. And after that, locked up, and then we'll go park and have lunch, and then we go back. And this went on and on, not only in this estate, in every estate across the state. And I don't remember even reading one instance of a dacoity or burglary of any of these cars being stopped, the manager being stopped and this thing being hijacked or his. Sometimes I think today, thanks to media, and media is very powerful, isn't it? It forms our perceptions. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. What happens is, we've all got the impression this is the world is unsafe, not the world, here it is unsafe, life is unsafe, fraught with all kinds of risk, we don't know so many things. And you, at the same time, you ask people, even anecdotally, you ask people, do you know anybody whose house was burgled? Personally, do you know anybody? Nobody can tell you. Whereas I visit my friends we travel abroad very frequently. It is a very common occurrence. In many of the so-called developed countries in the world, where it's a conversation piece when they say, yeah, my Jack's house was, he went for a holiday and came back and found the house burgled and things like that. So my point here is perception is formed by many things, and I want to talk about our responsibility for fostering, building, nurturing negative perceptions, and what is our responsibility for that. I agree we should face reality, face facts on, but I feel in Kerala we have gone too far the other way. In helping to support a negative narrative about a place which does not deserve it, and a state which actually has some extraordinary achievements for which we should feel proud of. It has nothing to do with the government. I don't have a wakalat from either the LDF government or the UDF government. I am not on any of their committees. I don't vote for any of them. So this has nothing to do with that. I am just saying, here, as business people, as professionals, we are doing a disservice to the place which you are in if you help foster this negative narrative. Because negative narratives are extremely powerful, and and all over the world people realize this. What they call the dangers of the single narrative. And what is the danger of the single narrative? Everybody feels they know everything, so they need not now look at the facts. കേരളത്തിനെ പറ്റി ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു ചർച്ചയിൽ ആമുഖമായിട്ട് പറയുന്നത് എന്താണ്? നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്നത് പോലെ. അവിടെയാണ് അപകടം. ഈ എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളിലാണ് അപകടം. How many of those അറിവുകൾ are based on facts? It's mostly you'll find it's anecdotal. It's based on somebody told you who knew somebody who said that he saw something which happened to somebody, etc. I'm not saying there is no basis. So why is negative narrative so powerful? See, let us say, I don't drink, but let us say that I have a habit of enjoying a drink. That doesn't make me a drunkard. It only means I enjoy a drink. Okay, I go to the club or I have a drink at home. But if I now, when walking along the road, trip on something and fall, people who know me will look at each other and nod and say, so that means there is no need now to look at why did I actually fall. Because everybody knows. So if a factory in Kerala closes, we know why it closed. Kerala must be, we know the explanation. Factories starting and closing are normal phenomena across the world. If you look at the figures, the percentage is not 1% higher in Kerala. Not 1% higher in Kerala. So if a factory closes in neighboring Tamil Nadu, does it hit the news? Do you see it in the newspapers? You never see that. Here, if a factory closes, you will see that in the newspapers. Okay? So my point here is, that's the danger of the single narrative. Is anybody else falls on the road, it doesn't matter. Balagopal, who has a drink once in a while, falls, So what happens is, we don't look at the facts, we become lazy in our thinking, and we think we know all that is wrong. And we miss, as a result, a lot of the useful, valuable information. Not that suddenly Kerala is good or great or anything, it's just like any other place. One more thing is that the topic was given as sustainable manufacturing, so I just like to clarify so that in my limited time I must do justice to that. By sustainable manufacturing, I am not referring to environment and ESG and green manufacturing or anything. What do I mean by sustainability? I mean, it is manufacturing that can endure and grow as a business, and which is not dependent on serendipitous factors like some local availability of this raw material or that raw material or something. The modern definition of globalization or globalized manufacturing is buy raw materials and components from where it is inexpensive, manufacture where it is efficient, and sell where it is profitable. That's all. So there is no question that you have to process the raw material which is grown in your area. You don't have to. You can buy the raw material from halfway across the world. The sign of a modern manufacturing enterprise or a modern manufacturing ecosystem is when you have a growing number of companies which are, not that there is anything wrong with processing the local raw material, but early stages of industrial development were always based on local processing of locally available raw materials. So if coconut was available locally, you process coconut and make some products out of it. If coir is available locally, you do that. If cashew is available locally, you do that. Most of Kerala's manufacturing sector consisted of very low value added processing of all these industries, with a few honorable exceptions, including Kerala solvent extractions, which is an absolute, what shall I say, one of the real golden organizations which has set the pace for modern manufacturing, and which is now followed by many others. This definition of modern manufacturing is very important to keep in mind, because it means, say, just look at Kerala. What raw materials does Kerala have? What industrial raw materials does Kerala have? To the best of my knowledge, it has nothing. What does Taiwan have? It has nothing. What does South Korea have? It has absolutely no. It has no coal, no rock, no iron ore, no manganese, no this, no that, nothing. Those are industrial powerhouses. What do? They buy raw materials from very far away. They process it in those states and they ship it to international markets. I have written my 4th book about the rise of a modern manufacturing sector by stealth. I have written, you have used the word by stealth. What did I mean by it? Aarorum ariyade. Almost aarum notice iyade. A modern manufacturing sector grew in Kerala. Even the government doesn't know about most of these companies, by the way. So, here now in this case, one common factor I found about most of these organizations was they met this requirement which I mentioned earlier of globalized manufacturing enterprises. Modern globalized manufacturing enterprises which do value addition. My raw materials for my small company in Trivandrum, they were sourced from places like, some components came from Vietnam, some components came from Japan, some components came from Belgium, some came from Thailand, some came from Baroda and Ahmedabad, Bombay. They all came from, in other words, thousands of kilometers away. They were brought to this small factory in Trivandrum. They were processed and they had to go back into a very competitive market. And where were these markets? They were in the rest of the country. The big markets in the country were all upcountry markets like Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, all the big cities, the big hospitals. My product was a B2B business. My company was in a B2B business. My customers were hospitals which had blood banks. So you get raw materials from so far away, components from far away, process it efficiently and ship it back to markets very far away. No local advantage, no logic for it to be located here in Kerala. So, what possible reasons could there be for locating it in Kerala? One very good reason is I am from Kerala. I mean, what other reason could there be for me to locate a factory? Where will I go and locate this factory? In Timbuktu? Or will I go to Taiwan because somebody told me Taiwan is a great place? Or will I go to South Korea because somebody told me that South Korea is a wonderful place for manufacturing? Where will you as a Malayali go? You will go back to Kerala. First choice is that. The default choice is that. Unless there is some compelling reason for not being able to do the manufacturing there. And that's what the narrative is. As it is, I had committed many blunders according to my friends and well-wishers. I was leaving a job which was considered a safe job, a coveted job, where no worries about tomorrow. I was compounding it by taking, as it is, business is full of risk. Here I was compounding the risk by taking an untried know-how from a national laboratory. It had been tested only at lab scale. Not even a pilot plant was done. In fact, I used to call my plant commercial scale pilot plant. So with all these risks, and to make matters worse, I chose Kerala to set up. So this is why I am circling back to this idea that, so in that book, whenever I used to go to seminars and conferences, and I used to be the contrarian voice, because everybody is agreed, and for very good reasons, that Kerala is not a great place for manufacturing. The dissenting voice will be me. And I will stand up and say, I don't agree with you because this is my experience. With all these disadvantages, I have got my company established, we have got into the international market, we are competing against the giants in the world, and we are establishing ourselves, and we are beginning to claw out of that, out of the early losses around that and make money. So then people started telling me, Bala, because you are a lucky guy, you are succeeded. So when I thought, okay, what they are saying is, this must be an exception. So let's look around for other companies. And I chose, for my study, I chose only manufacturing companies, because that's the field I understand. You know, tourism, hospitality, healthcare, all those fields I don't know about directly, but I know about manufacturing. So I thought I will. And I started preparing a list of successfully running manufacturing companies, and I also wanted to take that these should be, so I didn't study solvent extraction because I took a cutoff of about 35 years. Say, from 1990 onwards, so the 80s onwards started in the companies. And companies which started small by a promoter or a group of promoters using their little capital and grew organically over time into successes. And what I learned was astonishing. We've all heard of Syntype, isn't it? We've all heard of that company. How many of us know that C.D. Jacob with 5 lakhs capital started that company? From a agricultural family in Kizhakkambalam, somewhere there, and he got this idea that he was doing some contracts, and he got this idea that I'd like to do some manufacturing. And he thought that whatever spices processing was happening was just cleaning spices, putting it into bags and exporting it. He said, let me go one step further and do some solvent extraction or some oleoresin extraction. To cut a long story short, that small startup is today having a turnover of more than 3,000 crores. It has many factories, manufacturing facilities, some of which are in Kerala, some of which are outside Kerala. Including, he has a couple of factories in Xinjiang province in China. Okay. Now I'll just come to that part also, just one word. So, when I start talking about success stories, then somebody shrewdly tells me, Pashe, our Randamate factory will not be in Kerala. Some buddhimosham on the Aditya factory Kerala. But the second factory, they will put it outside. So then I started looking and found my good friend Thomas John, who started Agape Diagnostics, India's largest in vitro diagnostic test kit manufacturer in Pattimattam near Kolanjeri. Thomas John was working in a company in Bombay called Transasia Instruments. He's an engineer. After working there for 10-15 years, he thought, I can do the same thing in no big deal. It's not rocket science. So he came back to his family, and where did he set up the factory? In his own land. That's why he chose Pattimattam. Pattimattam is not an industrial area. There's no industry there. And I know a bit about it because he asked me to join his board as an independent director. So I got in as an independent director and came to know all this. Starting from that one factory, his next 3 factories are located all around. So my point here is, this is almost childish, this kind of discussion when we start, when somebody is trying to find a reason to say, all right then. So that much we feel uncomfortable with the narrative that things can work in Kerala. Why? For the life of me, I cannot understand this. Why can't we accept that there must be good reasons why these companies are succeeding? Is it a crime for a business to succeed in Kerala? Where is, for instance, which is India's largest electronics hardware manufacturing exporter located? Do you know which is the company and where is it located? India's large, and I am not talking about this mockery of manufacturing, which is what Foxconn and Wistron and all do, where girls paid 5,000 rupees like garment factories, 10,000 of them will be put into a factory. Everything in that factory, all the raw materials and components are made in China, brought in boxes and then just put together and put into different boxes and shipped out, and they call that manufacturing. If you take genuine manufacturing, electronic manufacturing, which is India's largest manufacturing exporter of electronics hardware? It's a company called SF4 Technologies in Kakinada. How many people know that? They have a turnover of, I don't know how much it is now, 500, 800 crores must be. Their clients are like the who's who of the finest manufacturing companies in the world. GE and Philips of Holland. They manufacture ultrasound imaging systems, and their capabilities are so good, and the clients are so impressed by the capabilities that they say they can ship it directly to the client without pre-inspection by GE and Philips. And remember, GE and Philips are Six Sigma companies. You know what Six Sigma means? Less than 3 errors per million pieces. Anganate companies have so much confidence in this manufacturer in Kakinada that they say you ship it directly. This next question, I think many of you will know the answer. Who is Southeast Asia's, not just India's, largest manufacturer of dental prosthetics, crowns, etc. Any dentist anywhere in India or Southeast Asia takes an impression and they will say, by internet or impression I Dent care in Muattuda. 2,000 plus skilled people work in that factory using state-of-the-art equipment to manufacture these products and send it out. 2,000 people work in that factory. 1,400 people work in my factory. Not one of them is a Bihari or Jharkhandi or anybody. I have nothing against people from Bihar or Jharkhand. In fact, if they had the skill, I would be very happy to employ any number of them. The point was there was no need to, because we had enough skilled people coming up locally to work there. And then, of course, language was an important issue, because for a high-tech, life-saving device like that, supervisory, everything is not made by machine alone. You need a lot of inspection and a lot of checking and rechecking and rechecking. So you need a lot of supervisory interaction. So language. So my point is, in the process of writing this book, it was a revelation for me. And I went in detail in this book into 2 companies, because obviously I couldn't write detailed case studies in a book of just 250 pages. So the detailed case studies, okay. So the next question, I'm just making it very dramatic, that's all. Which is India's most efficient and profitable steel casting company? Surely that can't be in Kerala. I mean, what do we have to do with steel? So at least here is a thing that definitely this is not in Kerala. Forbes prepared a list of, in that feature they said the 8 most efficient and profitable steel casting companies in the world. And there was only one company from India in that list, and that is PK Steels from Ferroc in Kozhikode. And that is the second one which I did a detailed case study. I mean, not case study meaning I went into some depth, because I know Moidu, I know the family, so I went and visited them, visited the factory. It's a pleasure. You should go through that factory. Of course, I must tell you, they set up another factory in Coimbatore, and they are setting up a 3rd factory in Hindupur in Karnataka. So what does that mean? Kerala is not a good place for manufacturing. You get what I'm saying? That perception will never end. Now why is this relevant? So since I have limited time, I'll wrap up here. So why is this relevant? Like I said, I'm a Malayali, and to that extent I am bearing a vakalat for Kerala. Whether anybody gives me or not, I'm proud of my state. But that can't be the reason. That's not the only reason. See, this negative narrative is important because it affects our young people. There is a narrative today, and I will end with that even Kerala, youth are leaving this state. That's the new narrative. What education is happening here? Nothing is happening here. So they are leaving the state and going for studies abroad. And there is anecdotal lot of evidence. So I have this habit of just looking at it, and then I get concerned, and then I start looking for data. Then I find there is a Government of India, recently a study which was reported in the business press, which has studied this phenomenon, and they are concerned about it because large numbers of people are leaving the state, are leaving the country. So they have studied the 8 states which are sending the maximum number of people outside India. And I look, Kerala is not there. So then Kerala must be 9th maybe, because it's not in the top 8. And which is the top one? Maharashtra. Which is the second one? Gujarat. Which is third? Tamil Nadu. Is anybody saying that the student leaving those states are leaving it because it's a vote of no confidence in that state? അങ്ങനെ ഒരു പത്രത്തിൽ ഒരു ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ വല്ലതും വരുമോ? അങ്ങനത്തെ ഉള്ള വിമർശനങ്ങൾ വല്ലതും വരുമോ എവിടെങ്കിലും? ഇല്ല. പക്ഷേ സർവ്വസാധാരണമായിട്ടുള്ള സബ്ജക്റ്റ് ആണല്ലോ ഇവിടുത്തെ കോൺവെർസേഷൻസിൽ. I'm saying we should not do these things, mainly because it's not true, because these are relative phenomena. Malayali youth are definitely going outside the state to study. Why do we think it's a problem? In China, till I think last year, the number of foreign students studying in US universities, the country sending the highest number was China. India was a distant second. Now India has overtaken China. Why? China is developing. China has already reached a middle income status. China is a powerhouse of an economy. There are phenomenal number of jobs for highly skilled people in China. And most important is the Chinese higher education system is picking up. And now many Chinese don't feel the need to go. The same pressure to go and get a good education from the US, that's reducing. That's why that is happening. India is about 10-20 years behind China. So we will have to go through. The curve will go roughly, it will imitate what happened in China, and then finally the same thing will happen when our higher education institutions start reaching world class. And why do we think that is not possible? Till last year, till 2 years ago, in the top 10 universities, according to some Western ranking, there was one Chinese university. Tsinghua University was, I think, number 7 or 8 rank. What is interesting is, just as an aside, Tsinghua University is 7th rank, 8th rank is Yale University. We've all heard of Yale University. Now look at the thing. Tsinghua University annual education costs $4,500. Yale University tuition costs $45,000 US. The Chinese mandam will go to Yale University knowing it is ranked one rank lower than Tsinghua University just for the satisfaction of wearing the blazer saying Yale and paying 10 times the amount. Who will do that? You will go there if you are getting an education which you cannot get in China. Today, in India, there are higher education institutions, say like number of IITs is limited, the Indian Institute of Science is limited, NITs are limited. These are all good places, but their numbers are limited. So people who want to, the demand from a big country like India for higher education is huge. So since there are not enough seats, people will go abroad. The pressure is there. There are Indians studying even in China and in many European countries, and not just the English-speaking countries. So even here, I think this, we have to temper this. So, നമ്മുടെ ഇവിടുത്തെ എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ സിസ്റ്റത്തിനെ പറ്റി ഇത്രയും ചർച്ചകൾ നടത്തുമ്പോൾ രസകരമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സംഭവം വെച്ചിട്ട് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ഇത് നിർത്താം. Because this is a big subject. I can't really, I mean, I wish I had the capacity to compress it into 15 minutes or 20 minutes. But let me give you one very interesting anecdote, and which gave me so much pleasure. A few days ago, I was asked to give a talk at the opening of the IEDC at St. Theresa's College in Ernakulam. So I narrated to them an incident which somebody shared a YouTube clip with me, and I saw that clip, and so many things were clarified by this 14-year-old youngster who is featured in that clip. Ayala pere Raul, not Rahul, Raul John Aju. പുള്ളിക്കാരൻ്റെ പേര് 14 വയസ്സ് 15 വയസ്സ്. Where is he studying? Government Vocational Higher Secondary School, Edapalli. And he is being interviewed. He is in the 10th grade. He is being interviewed by a lady from some digital channel. He is being interviewed because somebody told her that he is an AI expert. 15 vayassu is an AI expert. So she asked her, how did you get interested? I mean, what are you doing in AI? So he's a very engaging young fellow. Guru attitude or illa. I mean, he's not very cocky or anything. He said very disarmingly, he said, oh, in the school, I have 10 students in school. In the school. Outside online, and including overseas students only. And this lady is astonished. And she says, how did you get interested in AI? I like, my friends all come and our essays, homework, edit correcting. So he had a lot of such things to do, and he won't say no, probably. He's such a likable fellow. So he said, correct. Homework, essays, correct, edit. So he asked somebody, is there a quick way? Somebody said, AI tools. Google, he found an AI editing tool. That was his first introduction to AI. And he found it very easy to master, so not very complicated. He started using that tool, and then he found now he could do 10 times the number of homework assignments for so many more people. Then he started teaching that to his friends. Now, why I said this incident is, this is a young fellow in a government vocational higher secondary school in Edapalli, in a state where education system എല്ലാം താറുമാറാണ്. ഇവിടെ ഒന്നും നടക്കുന്നില്ല. ഇവിടെ ലഹളയും ഇതൊക്കെ നടക്കുന്നത്. ഇവിടെ പിള്ളേർക്ക് പഠിക്കണമെങ്കിൽ അവരുടെ പേരൻസിന് അഫോർഡ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റാത്ത കാശ് എവിടുന്നോ ഒക്കെ വസ്തുവൊക്കെ വിറ്റ് ബാങ്കിൽ നിന്ന് ലോൺ എടുത്ത് ഏതോ മനുഷ്യൻ കേൾക്കാത്ത ഏതോ അമേരിക്കയിലും ന്യൂസിലൻഡിലും സെർബിയയിലും അവിടെ ഇവിടെയൊക്കെ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു കോളേജിലേക്ക് അയച്ചാൽ അവിടെ ചെന്ന് രക്ഷപ്പെടട്ടെ. എന്തായാലും ഇവിടെ ഒന്നും രക്ഷയില്ലല്ലോ. So that's the second part of the narrative. Education is not happening. And after education, what? There's nothing happening here. we hear this figure given. I've heard people refer to it. Educated unemployment in Kerala is 42%. No other figure than that. I don't know where the authority of that figure is, because I've been looking at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is one of those places where either a government or individuals cannot claim anything, because it is editable tool. People can come in and correct it. If it's nonsense written there, they can. And then the editors of Wikipedia will correct that. Wikipedia is employment in Kerala, which went up to 12% about 5-10 years ago, has come down to 5%. Unemployment in Kerala has come down to 5% now. But we find old, very authoritative discussions conducted on basis of 42% educated unemployed. Since I have this habit of asking questions from people who know better than me, so I talked to the executive director of TIE Kerala. You must have heard of TIE. TIE Kerala is an organization of entrepreneurs. I was a founding president 20 years ago. Now it's run by very capable people. Jimon Bora, managing director of Cancor Man, is going to be the new president. So it's a very good organization. Other the executive director was telling me, he said that this year they want to take 5 interns, and they want to take them who are fresh graduates. Graduation economics, management, engineering, pala subject interns for 6 months. 6-month internship. They are willing to pay 20,000 rupees. I'll make it to them. I said, why not? Aren't you giving some publicity or something like that? He said, no, we are going to the colleges. And they go to the better colleges. Obviously, the colleges from where they will normally get a good crop of students are listed all correct colleges. They are all placed in a state where 42% educated unemployment. So my point is, all these narratives loosely going around like this, creating a picture which is extremely damaging and mostly untrue. That's my point. If it was true, that's a different matter. So I think professional bodies like Thrissur Management Association, the members, the organizations which are members of this, we all have a responsibility to explain these facts to the youngsters. They are all going to go out into the job market. They are studying and putting in their effort in the genuine belief that after this they'll get a job somewhere. And the evidence is that they will get good jobs. Manufacturing is growing, service sector is growing. According to the, and I will just end with that Wikipedia figure, GDP in Kerala is 11.6 lakh crores in 2023-24. Converted into US dollars, that is 139 billion US dollars. That's the GDP of Kerala, which is the 11th rank in India among states. Growth rate of GDP is 6.6%. Per capita GDP of Kerala is 4,219 US dollars, whereas the per capita GDP of India is 2,250 US dollars. India is barely above the low income category. Kerala is very much in the lower middle income category. China has now reached the upper end of the lower middle income category and is getting out of this into this other thing. But whenever we talk about Kerala, we think we get talking about basket case. Nothing happening. Get out, get a passport, get a visa, go somewhere else. Nothing happening here. As a manufacturer who started with nothing, no manufacturing experience, not from a business family, who borrowed money for even my equity capital inside there and ended up 20 years later building the world's largest blood bag manufacturing facility, which ships to 58 countries in the world. and knowing personally 50 other promoters, and I'm not stopped at 50. And please remember, I am only talking about manufacturing. Every invitation I get to visit a manufacturing facility, I visit that because it gives me pleasure. I like to see factories, I like to see people working. അവിടെയൊക്കെ ചെന്നാൽ അപ്പം ഞാൻ കാൻകോർ മാനിൽ ചെന്നപ്പം ജീവൻ കുറെ asked me to join them for lunch. It was supposed to be a short visit because we tired of program, we are going back home. He said, I just want to show you my factory. And he took me in. I was blown away. Have you been to anyone of you have been to the Cancor Man factories in Angamali? You should go and see that.
I've gone earlier.
You should see that now. It is phenomenal. It is one of the most high-tech food processing plants anywhere in the world. And it's a multinational. It's owned by a French company or something, owns Cancor Man. What I wanted to say was, I went to the cafeteria. And like all modern industry cafeterias, there is no separate dining room for executive directors and bosses. Everybody sits in the same dining room. Dining room, when these young people were coming in for lunch, it could have been the lunch break of St. Teresa's College or UC College or Rajagiri Engineering College or anything. You wouldn't think it is a lunch break of a factory and that these are factory workers. The whole profile has changed of who is the factory worker. They look different. The car park is full. There must have been hundreds of the latest modern bikes, about 10-20 cars. I know my own factory car park. The cost to company when I left 10-12 years ago of the employees who had done about 10 years service in my company, CTC, was between 40 to 50,000 rupees a month. We were sinfully profitable. I can say that now. A Japanese company came and bought my company. We were making money hand over fist. So the modern manufacturing, thus these virodhabhasangalellam are possible in modern manufacturing. You can pay your workers industry top class wages and make industry top class profits. These are not contradictory things. And Kerala is making the transition in manufacturing, as I have recorded in my book. And what I have said at the end of my book is actually what we need is many more case studies and field research and all to be done, which management associations like Thrissur Management Association should sponsor the students to do it. Go out and actually study these companies. Our case studies will give us a lot more information and also a lot more confidence and hope that we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balagopal Chandrasekhar, for that enlightening address. We now open the floor for questions. Request everyone to please ask only one question per person to ensure that as many people as possible can participate. So kindly raise your hand and wait for the microphone to reach you before making your comment.
Yeah. I think there's somebody.
You talked about a narrative which is reality. But unfortunately, I totally disagree with you on this particular aspect. Because narrative, it becomes true only if the statistics prove that. If you look at 100 companies which have started, 100 industries which have been started in Kerala, I'm sure 20 years from then, 80 of them will be closed. Taking my own example, at the age of 23, after IIT I came and started my industry. I ran it for 42 years. At the age of 65, I decided I'm going to take retirement. Last 4 years, I've realized that true heaven is a place on earth, and that heaven is spiritual. Because I closed my factory. I did not realize that it was such a big hell when it was running. Only when I closed it, I realized that it was really hell. So, though you may say it is narrative, this is the hard reality.
So what I said was not reality.
Pardon?
So what I said, sir, is ipso facto not reality.
It is exceptions to the rule.
50 exceptions.
Yes. Out of how many thousands of 10,000s of industries?
Okay. Now I don't want to argue with you. I'm just saying.
I'm just waiting my own experience.
No, I understand. I understand it's your experience. See, many of us have had this experience. So which is why I'm saying we should have more case studies done. There are many, for example, I'll give you, say, Koretti Coats factory closed down. So there is a narrative here about, in our state, about Koretti. The personnel manager then, when it was closed, was P.T. George, who worked for me earlier. So I know from the horse's mouth why it closed. Why was it closed? Because J&P Coats were closing their factories across India. Nowhere else in India was there a narrative that Adachu Putichu. Their main factories were in Ambasamudram, in Thoothukudi, in Madurai and other places. There was not a problem. Korettile factory Adachu, there was a narrative. So that's all I'm saying. I am not saying anything else. I'm not denying your experience. I'm just saying this is the power of narrative. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree on the power of narrative. But what I was emphasizing was that most of the narratives are true.
No, we'll have to support it with facts. I gave facts in my book. You should give facts. Then I believe.
I think it will take a long time. I don't want to waste other people's time.
Sir, you mentioned a lot of companies in India, especially Sidhite and all, like it's an excellent story. But when you visit some of the industrial parks in Kerala, be it Kanjikode or be it in different places, the state of which is looking very, very bad. I think most of the things are not working. Or what do you think? What is the reason behind it, and how it can be revived?
That the industrial parks in Kerala are the worst advertisement for Kerala. In fact, I used to say in discussion saying that one of the things which the government and district, the direct industries and all should do is, before any foreign delegation comes, at least go and whitewash the compound wall and do some cleaning up of the. See, so those are discreets. The industrial. Now the interesting thing is, out of these 50 companies which I have studied, not one is located in an industrial park.
What do you think?
So my point is, that's another question. Why aren't industry parks functioning here is a question which I haven't studied. I would say you should fire the director industries. That's his job, to run that industry park. If he is not running that factory, if he is not running that well, why on earth is he then being promoted to industry secretary? He should be sacked. So the answer to that, somebody not doing his job, is direct. Some action should be taken. How does that reflect on anything else about this? I agree with you. All kinds of it. This is the same state where the techno parks are working quite well, are very impressive. The foreigners visiting that and any visitor coming there are impressed. Why are they not so equally impressed by the industry parks?
See, my view, look at that is, if you look at the high-end jobs, little sophisticated, good manufacturing, like your area where you work, or that may not be that, but it's a very specialized product. Or for that matter, the agave or whatever you have mentioned.
Yeah.
These are all little on the higher end manufacturing. Yeah. That works well in Kerala. The moment when you go to a mass employment, if you go to Sriperumbudur, the average wage is, in my view, a lot of guys are much less than that. Or you go for that matter to Coimbatore, less. That industries, in my view, it is little struggling to survive in India, but otherwise a little
in Kerala.
In Kerala. In the high-end industries,
absolutely, I agree with you.
Fully surviving.
I agree with you. See, the thing about in Kerala, for various reasons, which are interesting reasons which economists have studied and brought out, wages have risen much higher than the wages in any other part of India. There are reasons for that. Economic reasons why the wages have risen. Now, low value-adding industry, which is low value-adding means which are obviously very sensitive to wages, will not be able to flourish. That's what led to the deindustrialization of the cashew sector, coir sector, and the basic seafood sector, the basic, so many other sectors. So they all declined or they migrated away from Kerala. That was logical. That was a normal. See, how many of us know that garment industry, the first center was New York City. New York City, there's a garment district which is today a tourist attraction, isn't it? When wages there rose, it went to New Jersey. From there it went to southern states of USA. From there it went to Japan. From there it went to Malaysia. From there it went to Taiwan and China. And now it has ended up in Bangladesh. There's nothing special about Kerala. That's all I'm saying. So wages go up, low value adding industry, where wages will be low, cannot work here.
Yeah, but at the same point, I would also address one thing. The productivity of a normal Kerala labor is much higher than anybody compared to India. At least I am not from a manufacturing industry, I am from a real estate hardcore construction. What I found is, even a construction worker in Kerala, if I give him a job, the kind of productivity is much better than a guy who comes from outside. Okay, the problem with him is he may not work for 8 hours to do that. If an ex-guy is a guy from other states is doing it in 8 hours, this guy will do it in 2 hours and he will walk off. That system doesn't allow, it's not getting accepted here. I did a little study, so even a China worker, if we go to a construction site, at least about a Kerala worker works about 70 to 80% of the productivity that guy is giving. That is also an advantage from Kerala. Good. But that's my thank you.
Yeah.
Sir, may I put a question in Malayalam, sir? Kerala, is it the arrogance of the workers, or is it the inefficiency of the middle level management, or is it the inefficiency and undue influence of government or some other agency to the top pack are responsible for the failure of factories in Kerala?
See, if failures of factories in Kerala, I initially wanted to set up my company in industrial estate called Kottur Industrial Estate in Mehboob Nagar in Hyderabad, outside Hyderabad. It is one of the most industrially developed industrial parks around Hyderabad, Kottur Industrial Estate. Kottur Industrial Estate, I remember when I went there to look for a site, I was disturbed at the number of factories which were closed. There was a time, for instance, in Pina Industrial Estate, if you went there, you will find a large number of small units closed. Factories starting up and closing down, industry. In any economy, the mortality rate is higher in some sectors, some businesses, like for instance restaurant business, the mortality rate is very high. If 10 restaurants start 1 year later, hardly any of them will be still in business. In the case of factories, it may be a little bit more. But this is a normal phenomenon. So, you mentioned about arrogance of this thing. When my Japanese collaborators acquired an American company, and they asked me that now I have to deal with that American company. So, at the Aditya trip, I went to US on business. So, Denver, our company visited. Obviously, somebody had already briefed them that this factory is located in Kerala. And there's a communist government. Communists are American salana, trade unions. The first question which came from the directors and all that in that closed meeting was, Bala, how do you deal with, workers? We've heard that they're very tough to deal with. So, I asked him, I just want to know, for instance, on the shop floor, say, you're a shop shift engineer, on the shop floor, a worker, say, let's say his name is Balagopal. In the US, I said, supposing his name is Jack. And Jack goes and finds from the notice board that he is being put on B shift or C shift or something. Shift rota mati, C shift rota, night shift. So he comes to you. So I asked that director. He comes to you and says, hey, I am being put in C shift again. Why am I being put again? So I asked the American, what will your answer be? Will your answer be, that's my decision, don't open your mouth, you just go back and do your work? So all of them laughed and said, Bala, are we crazy? We'll have trouble on the shop floor if we give an answer like that. So I said, then what do you do? We'll explain to him why his name has come again. So I said, Malayalis are like Americans. They ask questions. There are many managers who consider that to be impertinence, that to be a misdemeanor. So, now, the third point is what is the role of government, which you mentioned, the government officials, and usually that will be the labor department, if in case there is some meeting or some dispute or anything like that. My experience is that you have both in Kerala. You have some exceptionally capable district labor officers who help you to resolve problems, and you also have others who make the problems worse by what they say and what they do and what they don't do. So you have both. So the labor office at the district level for SMEs, small companies, is actually a dispute resolution mechanism. And if you cannot solve it within the organization, you have to go and get it solved somewhere. The missionary for doing that is the DLO office. So, my experience has been, you find both. So you find people who make the problem worse, and you find people who really help you to solve the problem. So I think whatever you said about the nature character, we can't change it. People are like that. But we have found it possible to work with them. And they are all Malayalis. They are all from various parts of southern Kerala. Yeah, I have 4 unions. When my INTUC union leader, whenever he was not chief minister, was Umman Chandi. My CITU union leader in the factory was Advocate Sampath, who was a Marxist Party MP from Attingal. My BMS union leader was the BJP district committee head, and my biggest union was an independent union. And we never lost even one shift production in 20 years of operation when I was running it. And after that also it continues. 10 years after, there has been no dispute. And when I talk to my old Japanese colleagues, they have 6 factories across the world. They are the world's largest manufacturers of this product. They have 6 factories. They have a factory in Vietnam, they have a factory in Japan, they have a factory in China, they have a factory in Northern Ireland, and a factory in US. The factory which has been winning the award for the highest productivity, the highest profitability is the Trivandrum factory. 10 years after I left. So I think with all this, with unions, with all this, it's not a contradiction in terms. I think there's a lot to do with the management and the capability of frontline managers, the way they deal with matters and everything. So there's no shortcut, there is no formula. I don't think there is a magic mantra or anything. These are realities. People are like that in Kerala. Are not offences or crimes in this country, to the best of my knowledge. Under the Constitution of India, you are entitled to behave like that. It's your freedom to behave like that. Our job as entrepreneurs and managers is to learn how to work with people who behave like that. And I think many are doing that. All the success stories are of people who are managing that. That's the message. That's the story here.
Sir. Excuse me, sir. Sir. Yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
എനിക്ക് സ്റ്റാറ്റിസ്റ്റിക്സ് അറിഞ്ഞൂടാ, പക്ഷേ സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് മിഷനിൽ ഞാൻ അറിയാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞത് ഔട്ട് ഓഫ് ദി 10 സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്പ് ദാറ്റ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട്, mostly 8 of them are failing. And there are many failures and suicides the best road in Kerala ever made is from Thrissur to Palakkad by Malaysian government. And that guy has to suicide without getting his payment. And you also know about an convention center in Andu, where also the owner suicided, mainly because of some political harassment. So such things are there. ഞാൻ ഈ ലോക്കലായിട്ടുള്ള ചെറിയ വെൻഡേഴ്സൊക്കെ ആയിട്ട് ഇതുപോലെ ഇന്ററാക്ട് ചെയ്യാറുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അവർ പറയുന്നതാണെങ്കിൽ നല്ലൊരു എമൗണ്ട് ഈ ജാഥയ്ക്കും ഇതിനും എല്ലാത്തിനും വേണ്ടി സ്മോൾ ഷോപ്സ് they have to contribute. So one of the small scale entrepreneur told me that on average he needs 5,000 rupees per month to make donations to not only to political parties, churches, temples, and such organizations. So how can a starting firm can അതെങ്ങനെ പേ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും 5,000 rupees per month? പിന്നെ നമ്മൾ ഈ രണ്ട് സക്സസ് സ്റ്റോറി അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യുന്നപ്പോൾ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഈ 8 സ്റ്റാർട്ടപ്സ് ഫെയിലിയർ ആയി പോയി എന്നുള്ളത് കൂടി അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സാറ് from IIS. Jacob, as you mentioned, is from an agriculture background. But there is something in common for both of you because you have some sort of intelligence to tackle over the problems. But everybody may not be having that much skills or intelligence to tackle the problems. So those who are not able to tackle the problem suddenly fail. They are honest in their industry, they are straightforward, but they fail in their industry only because they don't know how to tackle the problem. I will also mention how we could. So I have developed a concrete which is not made of cement, and I have proved it before the VCs and top officials in the state in a meeting. Especially invited me to see the Kerala State Science and Technology Council has invited me to explain about this.
Can you just
but even after the intervention of a VC of 2 universities and a planning commission member, directly to asking some of the government or quasi-government organizations, you just try this. Many discussions was held and they said it is okay, it is excellent, but not even a single chance was given. 6 mails was sent to our Vidinyam board. This is ideal for marine environment. No response was given. Not even a reply mail was given. So such situations is also there.
About the startup mission data, I don't have this information about that 8 out of the 10 are failing. I don't have that. But if that is the information which startup mission has given you, I am not surprised because this is almost the same proportion in Silicon Valley. For your information, startup ecosystem anywhere in the world, 7 to 8 out of the startups will fail in the first 6 months to 1 year. So that's a Agola Pradipasana. So my point here is, see, many of us, when we see something in Kerala, it will be good if we also try to immediately see what is the figure, what is the same figure in another state. If we get that figure, then we will start getting less uncomfortable and we'll start realizing that maybe there is something about this whole startup ecosystem. Having mentioned the startup mission, Niti Aayog, which I think you can hear me. I have a loud voice. So Niti Aayog, which is no friend of Kerala, has rated Kerala startup mission as the best startup ecosystem in India among all the states. Niti Aayog has rated. Well, you can say that there's something wrong with the Niti Aayog. That's one view. But my view is that that is based on some comparisons. And they have interstate comparison of all the states. They have some metrics on the basis of which they are making those statements. So, what I am seeing, for instance, one of the things on which I spend a lot of my time is many startups come to me under the misunderstanding that I can help them. They somehow think that I can help them. So at least what I do is, whether I can help them or not, I listen to them. So when they come, when I was a startup also, I remember what I often wanted was somebody to listen to me. because I passed through really bad times. So I listen to them, then I make some suggestions, then I tell them you can meet so and so. I suggest that they meet some chartered accountant or a technical guy if it's a technical problem or something. From my experience with many of these startups, I am really impressed at what is happening in the startup ecosystem. Not the government, I'm not talking about the government program here, please remember. I'm just talking about startups across the state. I will just end my answer to you. Well, a few weeks ago, I got a call. And when I answered, the person said, Najib Kandapuram. I didn't know who Mr. Kandapuram was. So I said, what can I do for you? So he said, I am the MLA of Perinthalmanna. Now I don't get calls from MLAs because I have nothing to give to a politician. So I was curious, what does he want? He was inviting me to attend a startup scale-up conclave being organized in Perinthalmanna. The MLA of the place is inviting somebody to come to an event. What is the event? Startup to scale up. Conclave. And we went there. And I was part of a panel discussion. And in that small town, Perinthalmanna, there was a convention center. Really good convention center. At least it could seat 500 people. The hall in which we were, it was packed with people. And then the discussion in our panel was about VC funds, angel funds, how can Perinthalmanna startup, how can they attract VC funds from Bangalore? Our panel suggested, why do you need a PE fund from outside? Why don't you start your own PE fund? What is a PE fund after all? It is some people putting in some money and able to give that 10-20 lakhs which a startup needs. Why don't you set up your own fund? So people were wondering, fund it can be 1 crore can be a fund. 1 crore fund set up you need 10 people to contribute 10 lakhs each. Just look at the car park outside, how many Audis and BMWs and Fortuners and all that. The car park was filled with cars. Then they got the idea. You just had to give them the clue. You could already see the discussions going on in each of the tables. And I am sure, I had to leave after that. I am sure after that they must have set up a fund of their own. Not one, probably more than one fund. Because we said, if you go and try to get those VCs and PEs, they are expecting a success rate of 10x and 20x and all that. And they will force that, if at all they finance you, they will force you into kind of behavior which you won't be able to withstand. And you will end up making very big mistakes like many celebrated companies have done in the, many startups which were very well funded have made all sorts of mistakes like that. So we said you start small and a business is a success even if it is 2x. 2x is investment. You got 100% ROI. That's what a 2x is. So why not? What's wrong with that? So what I was trying to say is, in a small town like Perinthalmanna, there was obviously some entrepreneurial energy was being unleashed there. People, including a politician, were getting together. In the hall there were students, there were professionals, there were business people, bankers, all sitting in that hall. That is the change which I think is beginning to happen in Kerala. Where people, that transformation, that students, when they leave, should not only think of getting a job, but probably getting together and starting something and becoming job creators. That sort of transformation is beginning to happen.
So we can have one last question from a student community.
Yeah, before that, let me give you a chance. Just for information of the entire audience, I had the privilege of maybe sitting in the same ward where Balagopal sir was sitting in Federal Bank for nearly 6 to 7 years. the way that he was discussing on every paper that was going to the board, the end of the discussion ends with that what is there for the poor in this state or poor in this country. That's the kind of sincerity and commitment that he has been presenting in the board. So really, we from the executive level, whenever we come to the board, but Sir was the director and later he was the board chairman, we were very particular that there is something special meant for the poor and the last man in this country. So the sincerity at which he has been discussing this entire session, I really appreciate, sir, that you continue with the same tempo, same commitment, same come to the last man, and particularly for the manufacturing and MSME. Every paper that he was doing, he was especially asking what is there for my MSME. So I really appreciate your talk and the positive that you have shared with me. And I am sure that the last question that is given to the students will definitely help you to give something back to the students. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. I am a student from Kerala University. So nowadays, a lot of students go abroad for their studies, but it is also an opportunity for employment. So, can you please suggest some methods to retain the youth in our state and to check their brain?
No, but
my name is Archa.
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 Archa. So, Archa, my point is, students leaving the state either to study outside the state or outside the country, sarva sadharanayattulla oru pradivasam. It is nothing to be alarmed about. It is, you are not doing a wrong thing. You are not doing an anti-national thing. By going out, you are not letting down the country or anything. It is normal what is happening. And for this country and this economy and this state at this level of development, where the number of jobs are this, the quality of jobs are this, and the education system has reached certain level of maturity but has a long way still to go, it is normal that there is a gap between your aspirations and what the education system can provide for you. So you should not have a guilt feeling if you are thinking of going abroad. What you should think about very seriously is that the world outside is also changing a lot. Today, when people say that, when you look at the growth rates of economies across the world, most of the developed world, the G7 countries are in recession. They are having consecutively quarter after quarter after quarter of negative GDP growth. Which means what? That is why these stresses are growing up in those societies and the anti-immigrant feeling is growing in Europe especially. Now this will also come to the other more developed countries like the US and Canada and all. It's already happening. Australia and all that. It's already happening. So what you have to be careful about is things are changing. The Western world is not what it was 20 years ago. Manufacturing has been completely outsourced to Southeast Asia, and that they're seeing a huge effect, and that that is having its effect on US politics also. So I think as students, what you should be careful about is, if you are going abroad, be clear about the fact that you should be very choosy about where you are going to study and whether you are getting the best deal in terms of quality of education. Don't mix up the thing that you go abroad, do the education, you also get a work permit and somehow do some work and try and pay off in that case both of these are not going to do well. There has been a study which compares Chinese students and Indian students, and they find they are rated saying on what parameters do Chinese students and Indian students base their education decisions in the developed countries. And these include quality of education, cost of education, ability to work while that is, does the visa permit you to work while studying, and criteria like that. For the Chinese, what's most important is quality of education and cost of education. For the Indians, number one is the ability to work when you are studying. So, and quality of the education which they are getting comes very much down in the list. So, people are actually looking at this as a passport to a job. But what job? What kind of job? Now what's happening in the West is regular jobs, full-time jobs and all that are getting converted into gig employment. That's also happening in India. Which means full-time jobs with all benefits are being replaced by jobs which are gig employment. And as you know, there is a huge pressure of immigrants which are happening, who will also tend to keep wage rates down. Wages are also determined by supply and demand. So I think what you should do is, as students, you should really talk to student counselors and discuss this thing very well. Discuss it through. Because if your family takes out an education loan, it has to be repaid. The default on education loans in the US has crossed $1 trillion last year. One of the biggest sources of bank, the asset problems in banks in the US is student loan default, closely followed by credit card default. So the student loan, it balloons. Interest has a way of, interest clock keeps ticking even at night, even on Sundays, even on holidays, even when you're sleeping, it is still ticking. So be very careful when you take these kind of things, when you take the decision. Also, you must be also in parallel aware of the fact that across India, maybe not only in Kerala, or maybe not much in Kerala, in other parts of India, there are many good educational institutions which are coming up. Some of them are new universities in the last 10 years and 20 years. I've gone to some of these universities, and the learning experience and the quality of the pedagogy which I'm seeing there will match anything in any developed university which I've seen. These are, I'm taking not many, handful of them, like O.P. Jindal University, BML Gunjal University, L.M. Thapar University. Now these are the kind of universities set up by big business houses in various parts of the country who are not running it as for-profit institutions. Do you understand? These are not intended to be as businesses, and because of that they are getting in good faculty. They are able to invest some money. I participated in some of their seminars on some top class stuff. And that is now being reflected by students from across India are going to those universities. Ashoka University, places like this, which are already being recognized as world class. So I think what is happening in China, very interestingly about China, I mentioned that in the top 10, China had one university, Tsinghua University. Recently I watched a YouTube clip on education in the West. They said that the rating system has been changed by the West itself, because they realized that they were giving weightage for what makes sense in the Western paradigm, the Western cultural paradigm. Those factors which were important were being given more weightage. So they said that is not fair. To really capture the ranking, they must prepare a ranking which is globally meaningful, globally valid. And do you know now, in the top 10, how many Chinese universities there are? 6 in the top 10. And I'm sure many Indian universities will come into at least in the top 100 or top 200. There must be a few Indian universities would have come in. Now it's a slow process. It will happen. Many of the universities here will not make it. But there are good educational institutions here. I've been to some of them, which the names are well known, like St. Theresa's and others, and you see them. We don't think in our minds of these educational institutions as being top class, but they are. They are really improving. There's a tremendous amount of research which is going on in these educational institutions. The faculty publishing papers, they're publishing their research. It's not like 10 years ago. So this change is happening. So I think, as students, my request to you would be to, spend a little more time evaluating your options before taking the plunge.